Patrick Carroll, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero.
Thank you. Thank you. Really nice to be here and really fun to be here, especially talking, from one side of the planet to the other.
Well, Patrick, it is a thrill from my end, certainly, and our guest list, our audience are very diverse, interested in many different topics, but I don't think many of them have experienced the kind of work that you do. And I'm very, very grateful, and I'm very excited to have you on to share some of that message today. And I'm going to start with a heck of a question that I hope you can answer.
Okay.
My question is this. Do you know why I am here on Earth?
That's a great question. It's a really good question, and actually a question that most people are walking around, in the back of their heads. And I can answer it for you because you and I have had some talks, and we spent some time together, and the answer, Laban, is this: you are a very bright light on this planet at this time. A highly evolved entity that has incarnated into this world at this time. And that in itself is pretty special, but you have this ability to take that bright light of who you are and distill it down and synthesize it into conversations and insights and inspiration that help other people live their lives to the fullest and to achieve the work that they came here to do. And that's why you're here, to help this planet at this pretty damn critical time, to help other people, and you do it so well. So your work is the answer to that question.
Wow. I didn't really know what to expect or expect any answer to that. And I haven't asked you this question off camera. We haven't prepared any of this stuff. Thank you for sharing that with me. It's a huge compliment, incredibly humbling. I suppose the next obvious question is, how do you know this?
That gets into, the whole evolution of, that leads me to what I do now. But the simple answer is, I can see energetic fields. I can see into multiple dimensions. I can see energy. I can see people's energy. I can see your energy. I can identify various frequencies of the energies that make up what you are. And over the years and decades that I'm working on all this and got familiar and understood all of this, I can identify who people are and what they do, and what's going on with them, in being able to interpret the different energetic frequencies and the different dimensions that they're connected to. And how that all evolved is kind of a long story, but that's the answer. Is I can see people's energy, and I know enough about the structure and the kind of the scientific aspect of these multiple dimensions, which keys off a lot of quantum physics and quantum mechanics stuff. Then over the years I got familiar with it, and I can identify it, track it.
So I suspect there will be someone listening to this that's almost turned it off.
Yes.
They're like, hang on a second, this is some real crazy stuff. But there was something you said in an interview with a mutual friend of ours, Vanessa Browers. And you said that quantum mechanics, the stuff that you are talking about right now, is just technology that we don't understand yet.
Correct. Absolutely true. And it's coming into this direction of multiple dimensions and different energies and how they work. And, time operates differently in different dimensions. But this is all science. You can Google this, and this is hard science now that they are that the whole quantum mechanics field is now uncovering and replicating. They can do the experiments and they get the same result every single time. So under the scientific method, it's proven. They proved it, that these things, that they don't understand it, they can't explain it, but they prove that these things exist, which is really kind of the world that I live in and that I work
in. I mean, that's really powerful in itself. I didn't realize it was to that extent. But I suppose for someone who's just heard this phrase, this language, these phrases for the first time, what are some of the smaller examples that people do day to day that they don't realize that ties in with this stuff?
Well, the other part of my work is kind of a mashup, this big mashup of shamanic principles, quantum mechanics, and Jungian analytical psychology. Carl Jung, of course, the famous psychiatrist from Switzerland 100 years ago. What he did was he mapped the human psyche. He mapped not just the brain and the mind, but what he did was he actually came together with this fully integrated, comprehensive description of humans, including their souls, including that divine channel, and whatever you want to call it. And Jung presented this to the world, saying, "Look, here's who we are. It's incredibly complicated. It involves all sorts of stuff. But the spiritual aspects, for example, he referred to as the numinous, but he integrated all that. So again, there's hard science, very structured kinds of strategies from medicine and psychiatry that all mash up into this world that I play in and what we all play in. So if you start to understand it, your whole life starts to make sense, and you can start actually actively participating in the creation of your own life and expand into spiritual channels or creative channels. It's just understanding, the engineering. There is an engineering to it. We just don't understand it yet. But I kind of have this rudimentary structure that I've put together, and it works quite well. And I've been able to adapt it to a specific healing modality that I work with.
Now, you focus on a very specific part, which we can go to in a minute, but that long-winded story about how you got into this, I'd love to hear if you're happy to share.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try to give you the executive summary, but ever since I was a kid, I was able to perceive energy and other people's emotions. I just knew what was happening. I remember one time I was in the store with my mother, and maybe I'm like 9 years old, and I walked past this woman, and in the produce section of the market, and I stop and I look at her and I go, "Oh my gosh, that woman is really sad. Why is she sad?" And this movie starts to play in my mind, and I said, "Oh, I see her. She's got a child who's very sick. Oh, the child's in a hospital." And I kind of see this whole thing. I see that child's going to die, and that's why she's so sad. So I had these kinds of experiences, but no one could explain it to me. I tried to talk to my parents about it, and you're watching too many cartoons, get out of here. And I grew up in a very strict Catholic family in the 50s, and there was certainly nothing there that would explain anything. So I just thought it was crazy. I mean, literally, I don't know, there's something wrong with me. None of this is real. So I'm just going to kind of, die someday because I'm nuts. The next chapter was, I had the advantage of again, I was going to Catholic school. I went to an all boys Catholic high school, but it happened to be taught by a particular order of priests that were liberal in the sense, compared to the regular traditional Catholic Church. So part of my high school education was being introduced to other religions around the world. And I went, well, hey, that's interesting. The Catholic Church can't help me, understand and explain anything about what's going on. Maybe there's something out there. Maybe some of these other religions, the other spiritual kinds of things going on around the planet. Maybe there's something there. So, I start through high school and college. I go through, various spiritual traditions from India, and I do a lot of American Indian spirituality and certain peyote ceremonies and things like that. And it doesn't really give me any answers other than, yeah, there's some other stuff out there. They have some explanations for me. It's not really it, but I continue on through that various years, and I stumble into a Jungian therapist in Los Angeles, and I worked with her directly for 6 years. And then I'm introduced to Jung's theories of the structure of the psyche, and I'm like, oh my God, here we are. Finally, somebody can explain to me what humans, how they work, how the brain, the mind, the heart, and the soul are all integrated together, and how it all works. So that was a revelation to me. I move on from there, kind of, again, decades go by. And 11 years ago, through a very interesting set of synchronistic occurrences, which I won't go into, I'm introduced to a group of very advanced shamanic practitioners in Marin County above San Francisco, California. And I'm talking to them about all these weird things that have happened to me in my life. And they kind of smile at me and they say, look, kid, I wasn't that young, but anyway, I was a kid to them. I said, look, we understand everything you're saying. And I'm like, oh my God, finally, somebody. And they said, look, come with us. We'll bring you in as an apprentice, and we'll train you and teach you all this stuff that's happening to you. And when you're done, you can be a practitioner like we are. And you can go out and, heal people and accomplish great things working in these energetic dimensions. And I said, look, guys, I have no interest in being a practitioner, but I certainly are gonna join you because I want to figure all this stuff out for myself. That led to a very arduous 3 years of work. And again, lots and lots of drama about that. But other spiritual entities came in and were part of my training during those years. I'm working with these real master level shamans, but there's all sorts of new spiritual relationships that and from other dimensions that people come in, and other entities, guides, if you want to call them spiritual guides. So the 3 years comes to an end. I did a lot of kind of healing during my training period, but the 3 year comes to an end. I'm saying, hey, cool, good. Hey, I'm good. Thanks, guys. I'm out. And I want to just go back to my little world. And I owned an insurance business. It's like, look, that's great. I'm out of here. I don't want to be a practitioner, not interested. And they're like really encouraging me. Look, Patrick, you're pretty good at this. You helped a lot of people during your training 3 years. And I said, yeah, no, I'm not interested. So I leave the group and I'm getting texts and phone calls. Hey, Patrick, you don't know me, but my friend, you really helped my friend. And, you can, I want to work with you because maybe you can help me too. And I had this horrible thing happen to me. And I'm saying, look, I don't do it. I don't do it anymore. That was just part of a training and I'm out and, go somewhere else. And this kept happening. I mean, people are just coming out of, I don't know who they are. They get my name or, my text. And so they all told me the same thing. When I told them, look, there's a lot of shamans, Google it, you got a whole bunch of energy workers and shamans and stuff. And, go work with them, get out of here. I don't want to do it. And they all said the same thing to me. Look, my sister or my friend, we've been to all those people. You're the only one who helped, my friend or my sister, you're it. This is it. There ain't nobody else. And they all said the same thing to me. So it's like, it came down to, after a while, Laban, if God asks you to do something, are you going to do it? Yeah. And the answer is, you bitch and kick and scream and, do whatever you want. But sooner or later, you're going to do what God asks you to do. And that's basically what happened. I called, my spiritual guides together and say, hey, what's going on, guys? Come on, leave me alone. They said, no, look, you're the real McCoy, dude. And you can really help people. And we need you to do it because there are not very many people on the planet that can do what you do. And I'm like, okay. All right. I'll do it. Leave me, But I said 2 conditions. I said, I'll do it on two conditions. One is I don't have a website. I don't market myself. I don't have a brand. People who need me, you lead them to me. But I'm not going to, I don't want to have a big presence, especially when you kind of learn what the specialty work that I do. And I said, the other thing is, look, I don't want to work. I'm not a coach. I'm not, that's not what I do. I don't balance auras. I'm not a light worker. I don't do Reiki. That's not what I do. I said, if I'm going to do this, you send me the toughest, most challenging, darkest, scariest, ugliest things to work on. That's what I want to do, or I don't do it. And so they said, okay, deal. And I kind of thought, just to wrap up the story, I kind of thought, no website, no marketing, no nothing. The world is going to forget about Patrick in about 6 months. Everybody will forget about me, and leave me alone. I go back to my little life and I run my little business, and I go hiking on Sunday, and everybody will leave me alone. And it's not what happened. I did get a lot of people come to me purely from referral. Then it started to go outside the US, and I'm getting, the UK. I'm hearing from the UK, I don't know, Germany. There was a case in the Netherlands, all by word of mouth, all by referral. And to the point that it became full time. And so I ended up selling my business. I sold my real estate in Los Angeles. I bought my ranch in the forest in Oregon, and I retired up there, and it has been full time ever since. Again, no website, no branding, nothing.
It's just, all I can think about is that Cal Newport, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You book, which relates to nothing that you do, but everything that you are about with regards to this. And that, and in terms of people finding you, if you are watching or listening to this now and you are resonating with what Patrick is saying, Patrick, would you please explain the level of help that you can offer with the work that you're doing?
You mean like my specialty work?
Correct. Yeah.
When I was in my training, what I thought was purely by coincidence, I worked with a lot of women who had been raped, and it was always fascinating to me because these rapes had occurred, quite some time. I mean, years or even decades ago, and yet they could not work themselves out. It never faded. The trauma was just as much, a grip on them as it did, 22 years ago when they were in college and that guy raped them, or they were, their grandfather molested them when they were 11 years old. And that was fascinating to me. It's fascinating. It's like, why doesn't that fade? Why, they've been to psychiatrists and psychologists and, taken the antidepressants and so I started really working in these different dimensions, and I realized that major violent trauma gets stuck in a particular dimension. And this particular dimension does not operate in ordinary time the way our dimension does. So that trauma is locked up in the psyche, and actually sometimes other places. But if we go back to Jung's, we use Jung's terminology, there is a massive trauma of terror and rage and pain from that rape or that sexual violence, whatever form it takes, and it gets stuck. And it's like a computer virus. It just loops. It's just looping in the background all the time, below consciousness in that woman's psyche. And it's as if she's being raped 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's why these rapes never fade. The trauma, they can't get past it. And what I realized was that psychiatry and psychology, they're working in the wrong place. I mean, it's very cool stuff. And I'm not saying, it can be very effective, but when there's violent trauma, particularly sexual trauma, the psychologists and the psychiatrists, they're looking in the wrong place for the solution. It's not in that area of treatment. it's, you got to go into the dimension where the trauma is stuck, and lots of other stuff. I mean, very often there's an energetic link between the perpetrator and this woman or man. And so that the energy, they're still connected to that perpetrator. And sometimes even the perpetrators died, but I can see the link. That perpetrator, and very often sexual predators, maintain energetic links with their victims. They feed on it. And so I kind of was able to put all this together and start to experience it. And then once you kind of find it, I had developed techniques to clear it and just sever the energetic links with a perpetrator, get rid of them. A lot of times there's demonic stuff there. You got to deal with that, which is a little scary, but I figured out how to deal with that. And I cleared all the stuff out, and literally sometimes one 90-minute session, this person would end that session, stand up and go, and for the first time, she goes, "It's gone. I'm free. It's gone." And so that's the work that I do. And I work with some military vets that from what's called in traditional, modalities, they call it PTSD. But again, it's these horrible, really dark energies from the battlefield that get locked in, and you got to go into those dimensions and clear it out. So that's kind of started during my training. And after that, that's about 80% of the people who contact me have sexual violence of one form or another, that they bring to me because they've tried everything else and no one's been able to help them. And I can track it and clear it, and they're finally free of it and they can go live their lives.
It's Patrick, it's just so unbelievable, like that you would deliberately seek out to take on that burden, and you would only do that if you were capable of handling that burden, which is clearly something you've been able to do. And I'm really fascinated to know, what are some of the negative consequences of survivors or thrivers of sexual violence? What are some of the negative things that happen if they don't deal with this stuff?
Chronic depression, physical issues. That energy gets stuck or can link into their physical bodies from that dimension where the trauma is. They're very close links energetically to their physical bodies. Intestinal disorders, sexual dysfunction, a lot of sexual dysfunction, because there's a lot of energy. I mean, enormous, bad, traumatic energy in a woman's physical body. I mean, in her lady bits, there's a lot of really horrible things that happen there in that part of her physical body, and that energy will just stay there and interfere with all sorts. I mean, just the ability to enjoy a romantic relationship, the inability to conceive a child can prevent that, and lots of stuff. Depression, suicide. I've had over the years many people that I've worked with who have said to me after we completed our work, I've heard this, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 times. They said, I'm going to be honest, Patrick, now that we're done, I want you to know, when I was referred to you, I was just about ready to take myself out. I didn't want to live anymore. It'd been too hard. It's been going on for decades. And I told God, if this guy can't help me, that's it. I'm going to take myself out. I'm done. And I've had several people tell me that if it was not successful, no pressure there. I'm glad they didn't tell me that at the beginning of our work. But in any event, that was very gratifying to hear those stories. And I probably heard that 10 times over 10 years.
Far out. I mean, congratulations for you literally doing God's work, and for people that are listening that have experienced any of this negative, horrible stuff, is there any ideas, tips, or guidance that you could share now that might alleviate some temporary pressure?
You know, I've found that I'll do it like you do with your clients. You know, Laban, I do an intro call, and that intro call, can sometimes be, I mean, it's anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. And I don't charge for that. That's just kind of, they get to know me and I get to know them. What I found is at the end of that intro call, they experience an enormous sense of peace. And this is the answer to your question, just from the concept that, number one, somebody understands. Somebody finally understands and is able to articulate what's happening to me, even if I can't articulate it. Somebody understands and can articulate it back to me and explain it, why I'm having this problem and I can't shake it and I can't, come on, snap out of it, which is what so many of their friends would say. Just, the past is the past. You're, kind of all that new age stuff. And so the answer to your question, and people who may be listening, is, look, there is a structure. You can treat this. You can resolve these problems. There's a whole engineering to how these traumas work. And you understand that there's hope. And that's really the issue is, it's like if you had a, cancer and you go to the hospital and you speak to the oncology team and they say, look, we get it and we know how to deal with it and we can help you and we can remove that tumor. We've done it 100 times and we can do it for you. Just that knowledge, even though you haven't even taken any chemo or, there's no treatments, they go home, that cancer patient may go home that night and go, oh my God, somebody knows what to do. There's hope. They've done this before, and they sleep very well that night, maybe for the first time. So to those people who may be, tuning into the podcast here, that may have had these kinds of things, maybe there's just, I can give you some hope that there is a structure. This does make sense. And we can work on it and we can clear it.
So brilliant. And yeah, thank you for sharing that, Patrick. I know that'll help a number of people listening to this right now. Through my access to the Gamblers Helpline, now I never experienced any of the sexual violence. Mine was just as a child of divorce, and I've spoken about this a lot. I got access to a psychologist through the Gamblers Helpline. I got 1.5 years free counseling from this amazing woman, Lee, and she wore the burden of the world on her face. She had aged far faster than her biological age, and to me it seemed like she'd just taken on the weight of the world. And my question to you is, how do you deal with taking on such a huge burden?
That's a great question. I get asked that a lot, actually. And it's kind of a simple answer. When a surgeon is performing an operation to remove a tumor in his patient or her patient, the patient is on the surgical table in front of them, and they are working on that person separate from themselves. And when they remove the tumor, they don't take the tumor into their own body. They remove the tumor. It remains separate from the practitioner, from the surgeon, and he hands it over and he dumps it in that stainless steel bowl, that they have, right beside the table. And they take the tumor away and they incinerate it. At no time does the surgeon ever take the cancer into his or her own body. And that's a really good analogy for what I do. I deal with a lot of really ugly kinds of stuff, and but I never take it into myself. I always keep my client in front of me I'm working separate. We never connect. Very rarely I might connect just to kind of figure something out, and then I disconnect and I continue to do the work. And I literally, people call me a trauma surgeon, and I've got this, you're a trauma dude, you're a trauma surgeon, man. You just work with, energy trauma rather than physical trauma. So when I lift that, I can lift out a massive trauma or rage or fear that's accumulated from these violent events, whatever they are. I don't take them in. I'm not. That's an empath, and that's different. The way you keep it is the way I keep safe and sane is it's always outside of me. I take that traumatic mass and send it right up to the light and essentially incinerate it, just like in a medical environment. They take that cancerous tumor that they pull out of a physical body and they take it away and they incinerate it and they destroy it and it's gone. I do the same thing energetically and incinerate the trauma once I've removed it from my client's energetic body. So it never touches me. I'm always working separate. My client is always in front of me, separate from me. Like I said, occasionally I'll touch into it just because I need to, or sometimes it'll bleed over and I'll have to put up a shield. But most of the time, I'm working exactly like a surgeon and removing it surgically and then incinerating it without ever bringing it into my own field.
Well, that's a damn good explanation. I want to give you an opportunity to toot your own horn for a second here, Patrick. I would love for you to share some of the success stories if you're at liberty to do so. Obviously, you keep names and whatever out, but and before I get you to answer that, if you're happy to do so, I want to share a quote or a statement that a guy, Steve Hardison. I don't know if you know that name. He's a
I do. Yes. I know who he is. I've not met him, but I know who Steve is. Yes.
So I had the privilege of speaking to him on the phone just before for like 20 minutes. And
wow, cool.
And for people that don't know Steve Hardison currently charges $1 million a year to be coached by him. And I got 20 minutes of good stuff. But his video impacted me, which I'll link below for the audience, which I would encourage people to watch, which relates nothing to do with this, but everything to do with this. But he said, Laban, what's the worst thing in the world? And I said, I don't know, Steve. He said, false humility. False humility. And so I wanted to say that to you before you had an opportunity to share a success or some success stories from the work you've been doing.
I can tell you a couple of really good stories. I mean, in general, freeing people from the trauma of sexual violence, either as adults or children, in itself is pretty rewarding. And I've heard the stories about, look, Patrick, you were my last hope. I mean, you saved my life, literally, and that's pretty humbling, just on that. But there are two things that come to mind that I do remember. One is I've worked with several clients who were dissociative identity disorder, commonly referred to as a multiple personality. And I've had several clients who were multiples, and they're so interesting. They're my favorite projects to work on because I get to know the alters. I enter into the dimension where their alters, the multiple personalities. I can enter their world. I mean, I can enter into that dimension where they exist, and we form relationships. And I let them talk, sometimes for the first time. They're able to talk about what happened, who they are, what they do. And I can help them, and I have indeed helped them slowly integrate and pull that shattered psyche back together. It can take time because you have to go really slow. The alters don't trust anybody. So you got to go be really slow and really patient so that they will learn to accept me. But once they do, fascinating, because we just sit in a room in this dimension where they live inside the psyche, and I just let them talk and tell their stories, and I can kind of direct them a little bit. So that's one. The other is women who've had abortions. When I'm scanning physical bodies, I can see the abortion. I can see that there's it kind of looks like little discs, little circles of energy that's out of sync in her lady parts. They're just not, it's just a different energy. It's just, it's a different frequency of energy. It's just, hey, there's not right. There's stuff there. What is that? And I can tune into it. And I can talk about the abortions with her. And I had a client, for example, who had 3 abortions over her life. And we worked on each one separately. I tracked to the soul of that aborted child. Are you okay? Is there trauma about this? Is there, and a lot of times there's not. A lot of times the soul knows that it's not going to reach an incarnation. And so it just comes down, and there's an abortion, and it goes back up, and then it comes down, into another. But a lot of times there's some real trauma about a specific abortion that maybe this woman has been living with for decades, and it's haunted her, and there's all sorts of energy about it, and we're able to work that through and clear it and release her from the emotional bonds of that abortion. In one case, there were multiple abortions. We breezed through it. I said, yeah, this one's okay. This one's okay. The third one, I said, I kind of tuned into it. I said, you wanted this child. You wanted this one. And she started crying. She said, how do you know that? And I said, I can see it. I see the bonds to your soul. You formed energetic, spiritual, emotional bonds with this soul. I can see it. The bonds are still there. I said, you wanted this one. And she said, she was crying. She said, yeah, I did. But circumstances. And so we cleared that. We were able to, it took some time, layer by layer. We cleared her connection with the soul. The soul was okay. There was some very interesting past lifetime stuff between these two souls, between mother and child. They had multiple incarnations together before in various relationships, sisters or father, daughter, or whatever it was. So there was a real bonding there, but it just didn't happen in this lifetime. So we kind of, I worked with the soul and cleared that soul's trauma about this abortion, worked there, cleared all of the emotional trauma that the woman had about having, conceiving this child and really wanting it, but not being able to for whatever reason. Those are probably, I get misty talking about that. It was very moving. I do have these kind of encounters with people that it does get very moving and very emotional. And it was very gratifying at the end to free her from that, herself, her guilt and her shame and her self-recrimination for aborting that child. We were able to clear it up. So those are the ones that I remember the most of all the work that I do.
Patrick, do you have any concluding thoughts for our very attentively listening audience today?
Well, Laban, I'm going to go back to what I said before. This is a new technology, and we're just really starting to understand it. There's not a whole lot of people on the planet that really understand it. There's some, I'm not the only one. But this is a new technology, but there's hard science behind it. And that translates into that, what we talked about with, the cancer patient. You meet with people who understand what's going on with you, and they know what to do to help you. And again, I would just say that for people out there who may have suffered these kinds of really ugly kinds of traumas, there are techniques available to you to free you from these kinds of traumas and the depressions and the headaches and the illnesses and the sadness and all the kinds of things that come along with this kind of thing. I've been doing this for 11 years, and I've seen an awful lot of stuff. But probably the most important message I can give you is there is resolution out there, and you can resolve these things and be free of it, however ugly it might be. I've seen a lot of really ugly stuff that I haven't talked about tonight. It can be really dark and really ugly and really scary. But whatever it is, there are ways to deal with it. So I'll leave you with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Carroll.